Hi, my name is Sony Sheikh, and today I'm going to talk about trauma and the mental health of our veterans and the links to criminal justice involvement. So, a few research questions to discuss. First of all, we see a stark number of veterans incarcerated. About 10% of the inmate population currently in the United States are veterans or people who have served in the military. A huge issue with this number is that it could also be underreported because a lot of the times at the point of incarceration, people are not asked their veteran status. So 10% could just be like a smaller number of what the actual number is. And then we should focus on what PTSD might have to do with veterans being incarcerated. Post-traumatic stress disorder is seen to have a lot of issues with violent behavior, and violent behavior can also, of course, be strongly tied to criminal behavior. Another aspect to explore would be TBI, traumatic brain injuries, similar to PTSD, but of course, still very different. Not exactly a mental health disorder, but an injury that could lead to mental health disorder. And what can we do to solve this issue? Looking forward, what solutions would there be to fixing this? So the methods and the sample. A nationwide survey was conducted of about 1,388 participants. These participants were given online and printed versions of the surveys. The point of doing both versions of that was so that the participants were able to access the survey with or without internet, because only offering it on the internet would have eliminated a huge group of people that might actually be important for our results. Another aspect of submitting the survey or sending it out was contacting the people who were chosen as participants, because once a participant may start the survey, although it took 35 minutes to complete, a lot of people might not feel the need to continue doing the survey and might actually get bored with it. So recontacting the participants to make sure they finished was an important aspect. The participants were chosen proportional to what the population of the military is. For example, the women were oversampled because there are a lot of women in the population to focus on, as well as focusing on how many people come from which states. For example, if 30% of the military is from the state of Rhode Island, we would take a population focusing from our own sample about 30% from Rhode Island, whether it was all 50 states and the territories, whatever the military is made up of. We wanted to make sure the population was also structured that way. The participants were offered about $50 for completing the survey, although those who did the pilot task got $40 as compensation. So, findings. The main finding of the research was that Hobogen and his team from UNC found that 9% of respondents have been arrested in the past. That means 9% of veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were incarcerated after coming back from deployment. This is a huge percentage of the veteran population, and it's a staggering number that should be addressed. Upon further analyses of their participants' responses, PTSD or TBI actually led to an increased risk of being arrested. This had a huge impact on the team's interest in exploring further what with PTSD could be leading to these arrests. So, targeting in on what else was coupled with the PTSD was high irritability. At this point, TBI was not significantly linked to the incarceration rate, but it was seen that PTSD with high irritability and anger and many other factors about a participant's past are what led to the highest risk of incarceration. These factors included family history of witnessing parents fighting as the participants were younger. This included prior history of criminal arrests. This included substance abuse. This included domestic violence, a lot of aspects that could have even led to the anger issues and worsened the PTSD are what led to high incarceration rates. How to apply these findings? Targeting high irritability and anger in the PTSD patients is a great intervention technique. If high irritability and anger is noticed in a PTSD patient, to reduce that irritability and anger using different techniques could lower their risk significantly for ever being involved in criminal justice activity. Another important thing to think about is when these veterans are facing criminal lawsuits and possibility of going to jail, instead of sending them immediately to prison, mental health programs and other programs should be offered to the veterans as a first step before sending them straight to prison. Not focusing on the mental health of these patients is what will worsen this issue in the future. Paying attention to veterans' childhood and substance abuse history is also extremely important. A veteran is a whole package of what they've done in the past and their military experience that may have brought them to how they are today. So focusing in on them being honest about what has happened in the past to them and what they have done, whether it was drug-related or prior criminal involvement related, is very, very important for clinicians to focus on. Now, to get help, there are local Veterans Affairs offices all over the country that someone with PTSD or someone connected to somebody with PTSD can contact. There are different numbers and websites online for specific addresses of where to get help. Anger management programs for PTSD patients are probably going to be the most effective, according to L. Bogan and his research team. Reducing the anger and focusing on that first will really sever the tie between anger and the PTSD. Therefore, violence will be reduced, and then chances of criminal activity will be significantly reduced. A huge part of solving this issue is the veterans being honest about what has happened in the past. If they are ashamed to admit that they witnessed their parents fighting or hitting each other, if they're ashamed to admit that they themselves have participated in that kind of activity, or that they have abused drugs and ended up in difficult situations, then diagnosing the anger and high irritability with these factors and with the PTSD is going to be very difficult to do, and clinicians will have a tougher time finding out how to properly treat the patient. So to be extremely honest about what has happened in the past can keep veterans out of prison. Important hotlines to focus on are the 1-800-273-TALK hotline, which is specifically for PTSD patients, the PTSD Foundation of America, which has numerous resources for people who are needing help, and the Veterans Crisis Line, which is a 24/7 hotline to call in case of emergency or suicide prevention. Thank you so much.